Welcome to the Infinite Evolution Podcast, where you'll receive keys and codes to help you unlock your next level of joy, radiance, health, wealth, intuition, embodiment, and soul purpose. This is a space for lightworkers, healers, spiritual entrepreneurs, and anyone who wants to share their soul gifts with the world. We'll be exploring personal, spiritual, and professional growth and ascension through both the esoteric and magical and the tangible and practical. I'm Casey Aileen Knight, coach, mentor, as well as divine channel and soul gift activator. I founded the Luminous Evolution brand to help you elevate your business and beingness and light up the world. So glad you're here. Let's dive in. Julia, I have been excited to have a conversation with you ever since I realized we were working with so many of the same concepts and so many of the same frequencies, is really how it felt to me. There's so much resonance in the work that you do with your DNA activation, your personal modality, and your supporting of other people to create new modalities that are working in these beautiful new energies, and also your focus on personal power, empowering people to be the most magical versions of themselves. So just so glad you're here and we can chat.
I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. And I felt the same. I mean, it was such an immediate yes for me because there is so much resonance between us and the work that we're both doing and in our paths as well, it's felt like, so just really excited to connect more with you here.
That connection piece is so powerful and so potent. And I'd love to talk about that first, because
Mm.
I know so many of the people that are doing this work that is very mystical, very magical, very out there to perhaps, the let's call it like regular people who aren't into this stuff, right? To the
Hmm.
common zeitgeist. Sometimes I know it's been lonely, or in the past, for
Right.
many of us, it was lonely with feelings of being misunderstood, being alien, being weird. Did you have that experience growing up?
Oh, goodness, of course. I mean, yeah, definitely. I think for a variety of reasons, I felt very, very different and alone, you know. Yeah, again, there was lots of other things that were going on that caused me to feel that way, but I think you just sort of get to a place where you sense and understand that people around you aren't perceiving life and this experience in the same way that you are. And I love this point of conversation too, because, before I did what I do now, I actually was a relationship coach for several years and focused a lot on leadership and loneliness and
Mm,
the kind of missing component of connection for many people, how and why we wall off from connection or struggle to find connection, feel separate and alone, feel we have to do everything on our own. So yeah, I love this topic.
I felt that way as well for so many reasons. And I'm sure people that are listening to this who feel like they're here to help, right? They're here to help the
Yeah.
earth. They feel like they have a different perspective, like you're talking about, from what a lot of people see, have felt the same way. So I know, because I've talked to thousands of people now who have felt that way, who have risen into positions of leadership. But I also know
Mhm.
that the journey of actually being a leader, like you could choose to experience loneliness, or for me, it's actually been coming into much deeper connection with people than I think I ever
Mhm.
have had before.
Absolutely. Well, the way that I really look at leadership is that it's all about relationships, you know?
Mm.
If you, I mean, it's your relationship to yourself first and foremost to be able to lead your own life, but it's also like if you are going to lead a movement involving people, if you're going to be working with people, if you're going to expect them to trust you or to guide in any particular kind of way, like you must have an ability to be emotionally available, to connect, to understand, to be receptive to where people are at, to their needs, and you must learn how to ask for support for yourself, to receive what it is that you need in order to be able to transmit what you're here to transmit, and to give what you're here to give. Otherwise, like, it's just not going to work. And I've seen it many times, the wheels kind of start to fall off.
Trying to do it all alone.
Yeah, trying to do it all alone. And I think also, like, leadership skills are a lot about relationship skills. Like when there's conflict, for example,
Mm.
being able to talk through it, being able to show up and really hold yourself through conversations and find common ground, being able to set boundaries while also being emotionally available, being able to lead difficult conversations and participate in difficult conversations. I think that's a huge, huge component of leadership that a lot of people might not really be developed in.
To put
And
it
it's very
mildly.
important to be developed in that. But they
Yeah.
find out usually.
Yes, and right now, I believe we're in this time of great illumination of everything that's out of integrity and out of alignment.
I
And we're
agree.
seeing people who aren't in integrity in their leadership or their relationship to self or relationship to others, being, I guess, how do we say, found out for that? Being like that's being witnessed and noticed, and it's no longer hidden in the
Yeah.
shadows.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is, on one level quite beautiful and positive, I feel, and it's also been, I think, kind of a wild time in our industry. And, kind of a bit of a come to Jesus moment for a lot of people. Yeah, but ultimately, I see it as really, really positive, because we're all being called to develop just greater integrity. I think always, but I think also right now, because it's like the mission requires it.
Mm,
Like we can't get away with that shit anymore. Can I curse on here?
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks for
It's like,
asking.
um,
No, we can't get away with that shit anymore because we are in this really crazy evolutionary time, right?
yeah.
And I would love to hear your take on what is actually transpiring with the evolution of humanity right now, in your words.
Mm. That's a really good question and a really big question.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of unveiling of truth that is occurring, you know? I think that there is an intense acceleration of awakening,
Mm,
in terms of even just the average people, so to speak, that you were kind of mentioning before. And I don't like to, make a huge distinction like us and them, but you know what I mean. The people who maybe never really thought about some of this stuff before, or really thought beyond, their 401k and their, white picket fence or whatever, all of a sudden it's like there are rabbit holes they're going down that are leading them to certain things, and I think with that acceleration, there's also just a heavy polarization, and there's an increase in what I would say is, I don't know if there's an increase of kind of the duality of darkness and light, or however you want to look at it, but I think there's an increased awareness of it.
mm,
And so it's honestly, for me, feels like a bit of a pressure cooker at the moment. I'm sure a lot of people could relate to that feeling. But we're on the precipice, I think, of some really, really big change. And so there are leaders, a lot of leaders who are being called forward. And if you were, kind of going in a particular direction that was maybe not in full alignment with your mission and what you're here to do, a lot of people are just being reoriented,
Mhm.
reoriented and kind of put on a path because it's we're needed now. It's like get into position, for what's coming.
Yeah, I
How do
always like
you see it?
well, I really can feel and see very similar things, but I always liken it to there's just so much light coming to the planet right now, cosmic light.
Totally.
We're in, this period of intense solar activity, and the
Yes.
light is literally upgrading us. And it's so
Yes.
bright and shiny. All of the shit is being illuminated, so it looks like so much more chaos. And it's that icky part where, like, you're doing deep cleaning and you have to pull everything out and you see all of the dust bunnies and all of
Yeah.
the dirt, and it looks so much messier before you actually can give it a good clean. So
Yeah.
whenever people are feeling, the extreme of the chaos, I just love to remind people of where we are headed, which is this
Yeah.
co-creation of this. I just feel like it's this new level of connection, of
Yeah.
unity and harmony, I believe, because I know so many of the beautiful leaders that are really anchoring that in right now. And I feel like I can
Yeah.
remember the future where it's already happened. So this is
Yeah,
a time where it's
absolutely.
the
No, I
pressure
love
cooker.
that. I love
Yeah.
that. And I think that, I mean, that's beautiful concept, beautiful context to bring in. And I think like, you can answer that question in so many different layers. And, it depends too if we're talking about like a shorter time period or a long time period when we say now. But what came up for me as you were talking is like, I feel like it's just this is collective healing. It's kind of like, that's a parallel of what goes on like when I'm working with an individual, for example, is like it's the same thing. There's activations and upgrades and light coming in, and then this kind of stuff gets dragged up and we're
Mhm.
looking at it and we're unpacking it and we're letting it go and we're reconfiguring things. And it's just like that's kind of the way that healing and evolution happens.
Then this is such a great time to really talk about how it's an inner game first. We're talking about the external changes and all the shit we're seeing on the outside, but I think we both know that the change has to happen within each individual, and it's through all of those individual changes, the individual healing and the ancestral healing that we're doing
Yes.
for ourselves that then ripples out into the collective so we can see the change on the grander scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I resonate with that.
I would love to hear more about the healing work that you are doing with individuals, and of course, how that will ripple out and what you've seen with that. But you work with
Mm.
DNA activations and
Mhm.
your own unique modality that is a rapid shift modality, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's called rapid shift integration. And so the modality I use my voice, so using sound and frequency and energy to essentially do what we're just describing. And we're not only like, I guess, bringing in light or downloading light or channeling light. It's like literally just turning on the light switch in your cells.
Mhm.
It's flicking the light switch inside of your body, in your DNA, in your field, and opening up to the light that is already you, you know. And then we are also, you know, moving and releasing just a lot of stuff that is there that I would say prevents the deeper embodiment and the ongoing embodiment of who we really came here to be. and what we really came here to radiate out into the world. You know, the DNA is connected to our purpose and mission here. It's an incredibly specific blueprint that we chose before incarnating. You know, very specific to us, very complex and very intentional, I would say, right? And so it's so connected to our particular purpose and mission. And so when we begin to turn on those codes in the DNA, we begin to be able to align with our purpose and mission in a deeper way. And it's that, I think what I really love about it is it facilitates that deeper connection to the core self, to the true self, to our unique and authentic brilliance, to our essence, so that that can ripple out in whatever it is that we do, into our business and how we show up and make money in the world, into our purpose work, into our relationships, into every aspect of life. So that is my modality. And then of course, if people kind of want to work with me deeper, it's like I can deliver the activations. I do collective ones, and I do, you know, individual or personalized sessions with people with my modality. But you can receive those and have really big, you know, experiences and really kind of rapid realignment. But sometimes with some of the pieces, right, that come up through that, or, you know, you're trying to integrate all the shifts into your day-to-day life, your relationships, your business, whatever the case may be. I also offer like deeper support, especially for leaders, you know, to be able to just realign everything in their world with that inner blueprint.
Mm. It's so powerful to hear you speak into this because I know the power of that kind of work. That is
I know
what
you
also
do.
has been channeled. I'm just like, yes,
I
yes.
love
My
it.
head is nodding. It's beautiful to be the channel for work like this. And when I say the channel, it's really a channel because there are
Yes,
so many beautiful people who have brought through these sound and light technologies that
definitely.
are working beyond what we would think of, I think, as like really traditional modalities in the past, where there's a lot of structure to it. Because as I
Yeah.
understand it, there's so much more flow with what you do that is
Yes.
really responding to the flow of the energy, the flow of the individual.
Yes. That's right. Yes. And it requires, I mean, I would actually say like the healing work that I do, and I would assume you do as well, although I haven't experienced your modality directly, but just from hearing you talk about it, I think a lot of people, and in particular, I'm generally more connected to women who do this kind of thing. I'm not saying there aren't men, but I think there's a heavy element of feminine energetics that are involved. There's just a deep sense of surrender and allowing
Mhm.
that really must be there in order to respond to the energy and allow things to flow in a way where yeah, the mind and the ego isn't really you know, doing the things, which can be difficult for some people to like kind of accept that and get that out of the way. It's like, well, I wasn't expecting this, and like, well, let me flip through my handbook, you know what I mean? It's like it requires a really deep level of trust and a lot of opening to the energy that wants to come through, and just like a lot of, yeah, like I said, surrender and allowing to bring that through. And, you know, what is so mind blowing and beautiful to me is the fact that I don't ever know what's going to happen. It's always bigger and more, you know, beautiful and effective and mind blowing than it would have been if I tried to control the process, I think. I don't know
Mm.
what your perspective is on that, but that's just what came up when you were talking, was like, oh yeah, I mean it's feminine healing, really. You know.
You know, I believe I hold both. with
Hmm.
the masculine structure. Well, sometimes even just talking because there's feminine structure as well, but there is a union of the divine feminine and divine masculine in the work that I
Sure.
do that also um, transcends both and goes into that child of unity because my work is soul embodiment technology using light and sound that restores the
Hmm.
divine flow of energy through us and
Mm.
removes the barriers to unity.
Yeah.
And we work with DNA, we work with also the team that everybody has. And I also surrender to the energy that needs to come through and will ask highest self to guide, we'll ask the team to come through and do activations. And it did take a whole lot of surrender, trust, and also faith in myself to say the
Yeah,
weirdest things to people.
totally. Yeah.
We're like, I'm getting this. And they'll be like, oh, yes, this is so meaningful as well to me. And I'm like, okay, because, I've been like, I'm
Yeah.
not sure why there's a slug here. And then someone will be like, yeah, I was just thinking about my grandma and the slugs we used to catch.
Yes, yes. Yeah, that you have to be willing to say the weird shit and also, to potentially receive a reaction that, you don't know what that's going to be, right? But I understand what you're saying. And I think, I don't want to give the impression that there's like absolutely no structure to what I do because that's
Hmm.
really not the case. I just find that it is a lot less structured than some other modalities that I've trained in and then more traditional healing. It's
Hmm.
more like, the templates that I kind of follow are just things that set the stage and kind of allow the energy to flow. It just contains and kind of provides the skeleton for it for it to come through.
That is exactly how it comes through for me as well with templates, but
Hmm.
with each client, it's a completely different experience, even if you're
Yes,
working with similar templates, which is
exactly.
so fun. Now, I've recently had a lot of experiences that actually creates this complete faith and trust in me that, and it has for a long time that what we're working with in the multidimensional realms is really actually quite tangible. But I will do activations, guided meditations where I'm just narrating what I'm seeing and feeling. And my clients will go, wow, that's exactly what I was seeing. That's exactly what I was feeling.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, yeah, because we're here together. Have you been
Right.
having that experience as well, where people's experiences are becoming even more immersive and cohesive with you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's variances, in the
Mm.
way that people are experiencing what's happening, but definitely often, there are experiences where we're just fully there together. And I'm thinking of one client in particular, and she'll be like, oh, I was seeing that too. And like, or what one of my favorite things is like, because sometimes I don't mention everything because inside of a session, there is so much that comes through. And, I could be seeing like, I'll see a Black Panther in this person's field, but then I'm also seeing like this guide and it's talking to me. So then at the end, the client might be like, I saw a Black Panther, And I'm like, well, yeah, because it was there, And I think that just speaks to the activations that people are experiencing, the openings that people are experiencing, where they're just beginning to, sensitize and be able to meet me in those spaces, to meet us in those spaces so we can meet each other in those spaces, right? And I've
Mm.
also found that in my particular work, a lot of the time, the more that I work with someone, the more that becomes the case because they are unlocking and activating and opening their gifts. I've had people tell me too, it's never happened in a live Zoom session, but in my collective activations, it's become really frequent that people start toning and you know making sounds at the same time as I am. So it feels very, very collaborative, and it always feels collaborative, right? Because it is
Mhm.
collaborative, and I've always seen it that way. It's their higher self, my higher self, the whole team. It's totally a collaboration. So I think it's just increasing awareness of that.
Mhm. That is, I think, one of the differences between some of the older modalities and techniques versus the kind of, however you want to call it, a new earth technology or these new technologies that are coming through in modalities that work with this flow, where it is co-creative. You're not doing
Yeah.
it to someone. You're really working with people and supporting them on their own evolutionary journey.
Yes, absolutely. I completely see that and agree with that. Um, and I love that. It's just that, also it's not necessarily collaborating directly with the conscious mind, and the ego, right? Sometimes the collaboration is taking place at different levels that, aren't always completely perceptible to everyone because it's very multidimensional. But it is 100% a collaborative experience. And I love that. I know you and I have a lot of resonance around themes of empowerment and self-trust,
Mhm.
and that's really something in my work that I feel very, very passionately about and very strongly about. And as a leader, right, there are different styles of leadership and different ways that people tend to see themselves or operate as a leader. I would say that I'm a very collaborative leader, and that my position and my perspective is that, like, my job is always to point back to the power of the individual, remind them of that power, help them to connect with their choice and their agency and their ability to trust themselves, including what it is that they're perceiving, multidimensionally.
Absolutely. And I feel the exact same way because I want people to have that level of flow and access to their own energy field that,
Yes.
perhaps they don't have yet. And that's one of the reasons we're working together.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And it's one of the greatest outcomes of the work that I do with people. It's like that's kind of the thing that we're after is like that sense of deep connection to the self and to their power and their gifts and the ability to trust what comes through for them, to trust their vessel, to trust their channel, so that they can really just be. I almost like don't want to use this term, but it's the one that's coming through, a conscious creator, in their experience. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that empowerment and reconnection to self then ripples into their relationships. I
Yes.
also really love to reconnect people to the divine, to source, to
Yeah.
Gaia, to their team, because I personally feel like that disconnection is basically the root of all of our problems.
Yes, I would
Love to hear your
absolutely
thoughts.
agree with that. Yes, 100%. The disconnection, I mean, I would say it's the dominant epidemic of humanity. Like, if you look at the issues that we're facing, to me, it is all about separation and disconnection, from all of the elements that you named and also from each other, because it's actually the same
Mhm.
thing, So,
Exactly. To self in relationship and to the world and to
yes.
source and divinity and the all that is.
Yes, yes. We've lost um touch with that collectively and for most of us individually in such a big way, that it's created a lot of, devastating consequences, but it is always a reality that's there, regardless of how much access we have to that reality of connection. That's how I see it. It's not like I'm in a state of separation and I'm trying to get to a state of connection. It's like, no, you're always in a state of connection, but you are not participating in that connection. You're not aware of that connection. You know what I mean? You're not really plugged into that experience. But when we are, and then we're like, oh wow, like this is actually reality. This is actually the truth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's when
Absolutely.
everything can start to shift.
It is so amazing how it shifts so quickly because that feeling of disconnection makes people feel honestly stuck and alone and just like they can't. That energy
Yeah.
of I can't because I am
Mm.
on my own sounds incredibly defeating. I've never felt it. I
Hmm.
have always had a connection, and I'm curious about if this was something that came in later in life for you, or if you always had that feeling of connection to spirit, source, the divine, whatever you call it.
Yeah, I mean, I have definitely felt it. I mean, real big. That's part of, I think, why, I think there's benefits to that, I'll say, because I think there's a high level of relating that I can have for people in certain spots. But, I will also say that sometimes I say in a general way that kind of I lost that thread of connection with spirit. I don't think that I ever did. I really don't think so. It's always been a thread that's been there. And as I just mentioned, like, I kind of think that's just the ultimate reality. We're just aware of it or not. But I spent a lot of years of my life unaware of that connection and feeling very quite severed from love, from the divine, from the planet, from my body, from people, from humanity, from everything, to the point where, I mean, I struggled really big with drugs and alcohol. I struggled really big with eating disorders. I had a really, really traumatic upbringing. And so that was just part of my path to move through a lot of that. I think for me, to a big layer was when I got sober, because I think that disconnection, that experience of disconnection really fuels alcoholism and addiction, and so when I got clean and sober, it was like this big opportunity to look at that, and this big opportunity to feel that void that I was
Mhm.
trying to fill. I also had a really difficult time with relationships of all kinds, and that was another really big invitation and initiation to healing. So yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, that connection has always been there. And there have been moments probably like where I felt or knew certain things, but I shut down a lot of it for sure. And I've been in that spot of like, I am so completely on my own and there is no help for me. And I'm so lost and abandoned and forsaken by God and by life itself. Like, I tried to end my life, 3 times actually. This was
Mm.
many years ago. But it's like I've been in that spot. I really know that hell. Um, and now I get to know, this is like making me emotional. Now I get to know the opposite side. Now I get to feel the truth, and also looking back and recognizing I was never alone. I was never forsaken. I was never abandoned. In some ways, I was, okay, because I want to be clear that, like, in the human experience and in the 3D, like, if you don't have any help and support and you're suffering really big, like, that's a reality at that
Mhm.
layer. And you're going to feel that. And that's painful and that's real, right?
Mhm.
At the same time, I can see the love and the support that was always around me and with me. I can see the way that I was guided. I literally shouldn't be alive. Like, it's actually wild, the shit that my angels carried my ass through, you know? Like, times that I mean, not even just the attempts that I just named, but like, I mean, I think I totaled how many cars was it? At least 4 cars I totaled. Okay.
Wow.
Spirit's like, nope. Like, you're staying, you know. I was like protected like you wouldn't believe, you know. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. But yeah, I would say I have felt that.
Hmm. And it makes you such a potent example of what it looks like to transcend that and to remember.
Mm,
And that's so beautiful.
thank you.
I know my human had felt it. I just
Ah,
happened to have in this lifetime a very strong connection, and I had mystical experiences my entire life.
yeah.
So I was just always conscious that I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
And as a child, because there's crazy stuff happening in my childhood, I do remember having almost this split or dissociation between my human body and my spirit and soul. And there was this energy of, hey, if you just hang on until you're an adult, everything's going to be okay. And I
Oh,
remember having that disassociation. So I always felt okay because I would almost disassociate to that
yeah.
soul part, to the spirit part where it was, I was feeling that love and I just was keeping the human child body alive until I could get out on my own, if that made sense.
Hmm.
Right. So I've always had this weird multidimensional split that, um, it's obviously a trauma response.
Yeah, for sure. And
But
that's a common one too. And you know, I've heard that from a lot of people and I'm like, "Oh, I wonder what it was that like that just wasn't really the case for me. But when I was real young, I did have a lot of access. I mean, I had a guardian angel, Annabelle, that I mean, I still do, but I was very aware of my guardian angel, Annabelle, that I talked to. I played with like fairies and I saw them and they were very real. I used to draw pictures of like my angels and guides. But I also, I did shut down that access. And I'm not 100% sure why it was that was my particular path versus some other people really left that open and found solace there, you
mhm.
know. But I trust it. I'm sure it's for a reason. You know?
Yeah, and sometimes just the journey back towards it is the reason.
Yeah,
So, as a leader, as a
totally.
guide, I'm sure you've seen this over and over again. So many people go through what they are here to help others with.
That's right. Yes, yes, yes. For sure. Yeah. And I have definitely seen that again and again. And so it's likely that part of my mission is helping people who have lost that magic connection to that magic to, you know, to turn that back on again and also to feel safe to access that, you know, I
Mhm.
think is one of the biggest things. For me personally, there was a lot of layers of work on my trauma that I had to address before I could even feel safe opening those things. And I think part of it too is like, I know I've kind of mentioned this online that I think you've seen, but I grew up in like a spiritual situation where it was a really quite dark organization that my family was a part of. And so there was a lot of dark stuff that I was seeing and
Mm.
experiencing, you know, in addition to some of the other things I had access to. And
Mhm.
I think it was just sort of like, you know, I didn't have the tools to discern. I didn't have the tools to move through that. And so it might have sort of been like a baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. But because there was such a strong element of dissociative spirituality in my household,
Mhm.
in a way that I actually could, it was really damaging. Like I saw actually how when someone's not in their body, when they don't deal with their emotions and their, you know, shit, it's like all kinds of really weird stuff can happen that I don't want any association with. So I think that's also a really big reason. And part of my mission too is like does involve speaking out about some of those things and the importance of being in the body and dealing with things like the human shadow, right? So I needed to do a lot of foundational work, I believe, first, before feeling safe to open to those realms again more fully.
Absolutely. And I always say the line between the mystic and the someone who's in spiritual psychosis is incredibly
It's
thin, and the
razor thin.
difference,
Yes.
razor thin, but it's embodiment. It's the
Yes.
capacity to be
That's what it
in
is.
the heart space, right?
Yes.
And when you're seeing or being, you're just around things that are scary, then we put up our shields. And I also think
Hmm.
about those energetic shields where, from our nervous system not feeling safe, then either we're not going to see or be able to
Right.
connect with those other realms, or if it does come through, it's going to be distorted and we're not going to feel like we can fully
That's right.
trust it because we're in that place of feeling unsafe.
That's right. Yes. Yes. So I think for a lot of people, particularly like if we're talking about star seeds, we often have these traumatic childhood experiences, right? And we have, right? I mean, this is the case. And we have, we have access to these higher frequencies and we carry these codes, right? And part of the process for us is transmuting a lot of that darkness because it's like part of the mission. It's part of the contract, to transmute a lot of those energies for our ancestral lines, for the collective, etc. But I think the process for most people, regardless of the order it sort of happens in, does involve this correlation of trauma healing and embodiment work and more kind of, you could say, like spiritual activation work.
Mhm. I feel like a lot of the issues come through when people are only working with one aspect. So I
Totally.
believe that we have to be working with the body, with the
Yes.
emotional realm, with the mental realm, your beliefs, the subconscious, as well as with the higher levels too, with spirit, with
Yes.
source. If we're missing one of them, it's just not gonna
I
not gonna actually
completely agree.
happen. It's out of
I
balance.
completely agree. Yes, I 100% agree with that. And I think also, I think it's really important what you just named because too, like if you are only, like I hit a place where in my like shadow work, trauma work, inner child work, like whatever I was doing, where it was like, my progress stopped really because I needed more of that connection to source and to my spiritual identity. I always like to say I don't like to do identity work without doing soul work because that I found was like, oh my God, like this is the anchor. This is like the thing. This is the thing that directs all of it. And I have got to cultivate and sustain that connection. And this is why I feel like your work is so powerful and your story is so powerful because you've maintained that anchor and you bring that anchor into your work because honestly, that's the one that helps facilitate all the others.
Thank you. I think the bridge to that higher frequency or bandwidth where we can be in unity. If we don't have that source connection or connection to
Yes,
the divine, then we're playing it all from this very mental realm, which
exactly.
is problematic because we get stuck and lost and we're trying to understand things that are actually paradoxical to our mind.
Totally. Yeah. That the mind is just not designed to do, right? It's just not designed for that. And so also, I think like when I look at this is just kind of an interesting tangent, but when I look at the things in my life that have really provided the most healing or has like the things that have really borne fruit for me, right? That I've done, like people that I've worked with, mentors that I've had, modalities that I've tried, down to books that I've read or whatever. it was never my mind choosing those things, you know? And I think this is also, there's also something to be said for like the soul guiding the journey of healing and embodying and whatever the next step is. And so if you're not connected specifically also to like intuition, um, you, I mean, you can't go about like finding the solution from this very mental limited lens. Well, I read this article and this person said this thing, and so I'm going to do it. It's like, that's just never been how it's worked for me. I don't know if you relate to that or feel the same.
Anytime I try to figure something out, I spin in circles, and I've
Yeah,
also
exactly.
witnessed people
100%.
doing it.
Yeah, and people do
And
it with healing work. I'm sorry to interject, but you know
no,
what I mean?
that's
People do that with
exactly.
healing work. They try to figure it out and they try to fix, and then they spin, and then they get stuck circling the drain, and then they come to me. I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I totally cut you off.
No, no, exactly same. It is the exact same. And one thing I've actually been through this week actually is the reminder that I need the space for soul, spirit, intuition to bring me what it is that I am trying to figure out from my mind level. Because if I'm just in that spin and I don't ever have the space for it to drop in, for me personally, I will get nowhere. And I
Yeah.
actually danced and did ecstatic dance a couple times this week. And each time I did, I had all of the answers just
Yeah.
arrive
Yeah.
effortlessly. That's the thing.
Yeah.
When it comes from spirit and source, you're like, oh, here's the whole thing. Or
That's
at
right.
least enough pieces for you to play with.
Yeah, exactly. Or at least like in my particular case, I tend to get like the next step. You know what I mean? It's like just this thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's clear, right? But you know, it's so it always works like that, doesn't it? And then for me personally, I just have a tendency still to forget sometimes and go back into that patterning of like, well, I gotta figure it out, you know, and it's just, you know, the mind and the ego, it's just designed to help you survive. That's what it does. It's a machine that operates a specific way, and we have these well-worn pathways and everything. So, you know, you're like, oh, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna research on the internet and find out the whatever. And then those moments where you just move into flow, like you were saying, and you open, and then it comes in, and you're like, what the fuck was I trying to do? Like, why?
But if you know, we forget. So we can have the joy
Exactly.
of remembering and being like, oh, yeah,
I know, exactly. And it's good we can laugh about it, right?
absolutely. And I would wager that creating enough space for that is also a big part of your work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Do you mean space in terms of like in my own life and practice, or what do you mean by that?
That too. Spaciousness. Let's
Mm,
just jam on that because that feels like a code that people need. And a big part of this podcast's intention is to give people the keys and codes that they need to access their next level of their personal evolution.
sure.
So,
Yeah.
spaciousness is
Oof.
a thing personally that you require and something that I can feel that you're creating space in people's fields
Yes,
for
definitely.
that next level of evolution. So tell me about why you need that in your own life and what happens when you don't have it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I, it's funny. I'm like a mega Sagittarius stellium too. So it's like wide open spaces. That's just the whole thing. I just need it. I need it physically. You know, I live in an area where there's a lot of space, and I get to go out to the beach every day, and it's a very vast type of a landscape. Um, I need time, you know, for my practices, but I think also just, and this is a piece that a lot of people aren't aware of or miss. I really need energetic space, you know, and so what that kind of looks like is like, first of all, boundaries with people, boundaries with my own time and my own energy. That's super, super huge. And, I do a lot of things energetically just to make sure that not only my personal field, but like our home, the social media spaces that I'm connected to, and my messenger and my Voxer, like their stuff is moved out that's cluttering that I just don't want there. Right. And so in that space, I can feel more, and there's more of everything that I am desiring or preferring to come through, you know. I need a good amount of space in my relationships too, on a certain level. Although, my partner and I spend what most people would consider to be like a disgusting amount of time together. And I don't mind it. It's like wonderful. But there are things that I do on a daily basis to make sure that I have really my own experience where I'm just connecting really to my own field and to the energy.
Mm. I'm feeling a transmission of spaciousness coming through just as you're speaking to the decluttering.
Mm,
And from another Sag stellium girly,
yes.
I feel that. But
I'm like,
like that
get
we're
this out of my
similar.
way. Yeah.
Absolutely. There was a time last spring, actually, where Spirit asked me to let go of as much as I possibly could, like maintaining my
Mm,
obligations, but I had to not launch another round of my transformational journey facilitator training and
mm,
not launch the mastermind and just service the clients that I had, but just to create this spaciousness in my days. And at first, it was uncomfortable. But
yeah.
as the days went on and I allowed myself to soften into it, I felt everything expand. And in that spaciousness, I actually received how to teach the modality that I have
Mm,
to groups instead of in an
yes.
individual transmission basis. And it was so big, I literally could not have had it land for me, this inspiration, without letting go of so much. And it was the
That's right.
biggest leap of faith I had ever taken because I had to let my income just plummet. And
Yeah.
Spirit kept being like, shh, it's okay. You have
Yeah.
to do this.
Oh my gosh, yes, totally. I have experienced the same thing, and there've certainly been times when I've fought it, because I could be stubborn, and I, can also get into fear, and it's like, what do you mean? Like, I need to make money. Like, this is not okay. There's so much leaving my life right now, and there can be grief with that too, depending because I feel too like some people go through this with regard to their relationships as well, or belongings that they care about. It could be anything that's being. One of my teachers also calls it like pruning. Like there are seasons of pruning, like kind of cutting back things so that the
Mhm.
bush can grow, right? So there are those seasons, and we tend to fight those seasons. And I think part of that in our culture is just sort of like the hyper masculine paradigm that is normalized, and kind of that the whole thing sort of runs off of. And so we fight these cycles of surrender and letting go and clearing out. But it is only through that experience and opening that space that what's really for you gets to come in. And then you start to get it, right? When you had that experience, it's like, oh, okay, next time maybe I'll trust this.
Maybe, because we will
Maybe,
forget.
maybe not. Maybe trust it just a little bit more. You know what I mean? Maybe I won't fight it quite as much, right? Because I
Especially if
know
you consciously realize this was happening for me.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it does. It requires such a great deal of faith, and Yeah, I mean, I also like it's coming through for me to share too. Like there are seasons of death, you know, and that is just something that I think naturally most people have a lot of resistance to, and that's okay, and that's really normal, and that's human. But you can't have birth without death, and you can't just keep building new structures on top of rubble.
Hmm.
You know, these are just energetic truths. Like this is energetic law, and the only reason why we don't trust it is because we haven't been taught it really. I feel, you know, it isn't a part of our worldview for most of us here in the Western world, at least, right? But if we were more, circling back to what you were saying before around connection, if we were more connected to the planet, we might see that this is how it works, you know?
Absolutely. And if it was coming in for you, it might have been because this was exactly what I was thinking of when you were talking about true
Mm.
pruning to let
Mm.
things grow. In the organic teachings that I have about the elemental forces and reconnecting people with nature and the unified field, we talk so much about the
Mm.
wheel of the year and the cycles of
Oh,
creation and
exactly.
birth,
Beautiful.
growth, and then destruction, because we
Yes.
need space for the old to fall away so that the new can be born. And it is in every turn of the year, every cycle of, 365 days we go through this, but each creation that we have, a business, a relationship, just we have these cycles too. But I think that's
Absolutely.
one of the reasons there is so much tension right now on the
Mm.
planet, is exactly like what you're saying. People don't want to let go. They don't want things to change, or many people don't.
Yeah.
And I have heard that the nervous system will always choose the devil they know over the heaven that is unknown, because it's
Yeah.
scary. The unknown is terrifying, and that's where we're going.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, when we sort of dig our heels in like that, so to speak, which I get and have so much compassion for, um, you know, like, I want to say she, like, the truth, like, she's going to have her way with us. It's going to kind of, you know, so it's like if we, even if we resist it, resist it, resist it, resist it, I mean, this is when stuff comes in that's just like, okay, well, you're not getting it. So bam, like, you know, um, we kind of smack right into the tree and then we have to change, right? And the things get taken rather than us letting them go. Or like, this is where you see people, like I remember one time, like, and I kept getting this is like the most obvious example that most people probably have experienced, but like getting the message repeatedly that I need to stop and lie down and etc. and also learn how to receive. And then I broke my foot, you know. But this is also like what's happening on a collective level is it's like, okay, like there's going to be more pressure on this kind of. There's going to be more pressure until you finally get on board with like this deconstructive process, like surrender to that, because that this is just the science of transformation. This is
Hmm.
just how it occurs. You can't fight it for very
Absolutely.
long.
Oh, you can try, but it's honestly like fist fighting, the fates. It's just not going to be very effective.
No, it's not going to
It
work
is. And
long term.
I really do believe that the leaders like
Mm,
yourself and like so many of these beautiful luminaries that we get to talk to and support, we have to go through that on a personal level, on the micro level, so that we understand how it's happening and playing out on the macro level in the
that's right.
collective. And I was giggling when you were talking about your foot, because that was the big one for me when I needed to transition into my first business of being a healer, but it was through movement, and I broke my foot because I
Ah,
wasn't listening to the, hey, this is your next level. And it was that incident that
mm,
actually made me realize that while I was trying to figure out what to do with my life when I was 28 and some things weren't working out and I was looking for a career change into healing and helping, then I broke my foot and it was killing me to not dance. And so I thought, well,
Mm.
maybe this is what I'm supposed to actually do. And I set the intention somehow to become a dance teacher when I was like 28 with no professional dance
Oh,
experience
wow.
through that injury. So it's always
Wow.
redirecting us, right?
Yes.
To release what's not serving, going into the direction of where we are being called. And the ego will fight that because there'll be so many excuses like, I can't be a dance teacher. I have no idea how that could happen. I had no
Hmm.
idea. I could not conceive of it. But the grander plan had so many pieces that then dropped in for me. And I became a professional hula hooper for a long time
Oh my
before I was done.
gosh, I love that so much. I love it.
And teaching mastery
Awesome.
through movement and magic through these, magic wands that happen to be a circle. And um,
Hmm.
my brain could not ever have conceived of
Right.
that. So
Right.
it's full circle to the surrender,
Yeah.
to those moments that are actually redirecting us to where we need to be.
Mm, absolutely. And this is also where faith comes in because you can't always see the bigger picture. And even if you have that vision or that intention that comes in really strongly, you can't always see all of the steps to get there, you know? And sometimes you might not even have the vision, you know? You might not know, maybe you have a step, but you don't have where it's taking you. You might get pieces of the puzzle. And I think it's really in retrospect where we can look back and understand, like, oh, wow, like that had to happen to get to that. And then that had to happen to get to that. And it was actually just all so fucking perfect. And then that trust gets strengthened and the ability to surrender grows. And then maybe we don't always have to go through the big crises, you know, to get there. Yeah,
Yep. When you start to listen and you clear enough space in your field that you can hear the whispers, it's a lot easier
it's a lot
to
easier.
do that.
I would
So,
agree.
what would you say to someone who is feeling like they're on the precipice of some big change, something new, and they're wondering how to get there? You already
Mm.
sort of spoke into that, but do you have any words of wisdom for someone who is seeking that next level?
Oh, that's a really, really great question. I would say that next level is already seeking you, first of all. The alignment with it is essentially inevitable. It's only you that can get in your way of that. And, yeah, for me, I would say to create space to connect with your body and whatever access point that you have to truth in your body. And I would open to whatever the next step is. Even if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't seem to make sense. It's like, well, why would I call Roundtable for a pizza delivery right now? But like, I feel like that's the thing. I don't know why that's the example that came in, but like, um, that's what came in as like the important thing to do next. And then it's like you call Roundtable, and the delivery guy who shows up is like, someone you knew from middle school that you haven't talked to in 15 years, but they have some other piece of the puzzle, or they have some nugget for you. You don't have to know how everything is going to go. You just have to walk through the doors that open and walk away from the ones that shut, and work on your connection. Work on your connection with yourself. That is the thing. And with spirit, of course. I mean, that is the thing.
Mhm.
And it's just like taking the action and really letting go of the result of that action.
Mm, beautiful. As simple as that, we know it's
Hmm.
not easy, but when we can be in that surrendered place of faith and trust and just following the next right step, then that's where the magic really does happen.
Yeah,
And we get to be surprised and delighted by the synchronicities and the things that are beyond our imagination.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's just the next right step. That's all you got to do.
Mhm. Oh, that's so beautiful. Julia, I could talk to you forever. I have so
Mhm.
enjoyed this conversation. If people are just loving everything that you're sharing and bringing forward, how can they get more? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me as Julia Phoenix on Facebook. You can find me as Julia Phoenix 11 on Instagram. And 11 is spelled out like the word, not like the number. Same thing on my website, www.juliaphoenix11.com. And you can hit me up on any of those avenues. I'd love to connect with you.
Mm. I am always inspired reading your content, seeing your posts, watching your videos, being in your master classes. So I invite
Oh, thank
everybody who has
you.
resonated with anything that we've said to follow you and be engaged because I will just speak from my perspective. But what you are bringing through is such truth. It's so
Mm,
rooted, it's so aligned, and it is absolutely evolutionary. It's the evolutionary codes
mm.
people need to really connect into what is possible. So thank you so much for
Oh,
being
thank
you,
you.
for being here, for sharing your truth, your light, your journey. And I'm sure this won't be the last time that we talk.
I'm sure not. I hope not. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for this conversation.
Mm, thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe and share this out to people that need to hear it. Tag us on social media. You can find us at The Luminous Evolution on Instagram. And keep the conversation going by joining my free sacred community, Luminous Evolution, on Facebook, and get a taste of my favorite tools and techniques inside my free Frequency Upgrade Academy. You can also join me inside my membership, mastermind, certification programs, or private coaching to be deeply supported on your evolutionary journey. Make sure to check out the links in the show notes, and cheers to your infinite, luminous evolution.